Guy, you are the founder of values-based leadership. What is values-based leadership?
Well, gave you a little bit of correction. The company I've been with, Holt, it's now called the Holt Group. I'm in year 44 with that organization. So I joined in 1981 when we literally were the smallest Caterpillar dealer in North America down in Corpus Christi, Texas, doing about $30 million in revenue and had a couple hundred employees. And then mid to late 80s, our owner decided to grow and we acquired four dealerships in the span of about 2.5 years. And what's significant about that is, one, it was prolific growth. Nothing we were really anticipating or ready for. And we're Texas based, and we acquired dealerships, two in Ohio, where I had moved from in 1977, ironically, one in Louisiana, and then we moved our headquarters up to San Antonio because their cousins owned the dealership here in San Antonio. So we literally went from being the smallest overnight to having four dealerships to to manage. And what we learned in fairly short order, having appointed some of our own, mostly our own people, right from home base to go work in these other dealerships. In hindsight, not surprisingly, what we experienced was utter chaos and conflict. And it was, I would argue that it, in fact, was a moment of crisis for us, given the fact that a lot of money was borrowed to buy the dealerships, and a lot was on the line relative to our, excuse me, our relationship with Caterpillar, for which we are a dealer. And so we engaged some external consultants to help us in this journey, and our dealer principal was willing to do it. And Dr. Ken Blanchard was one of the consultants who came in, who's written The Power of Ethical Leadership and many other pieces. And so I was part of a group of 24 at the time, then the youngest. Time flies. I'm now 70 years old. And we were tasked with helping uh, execute a cultural transformation. And what that involved was embracing a values-based format for the organization. And in hindsight, it also helped us understand what leadership was all about. And I'm just being observational, not critical, but until that point, we were a well-managed organization, well-managed corporation. We didn't know much about leadership because there's a distinct difference between the two, as you know. And so over the course of about 3.5 years, this group was tasked with learning the model, embedding the model, kind of evolving the model. And at that time, I was in charge of human resources. And my own journey, interestingly enough, kind of a turning point for me. Our awareness of values-based leadership and what it meant to be values-based included both learning constructs and models and tools and processes, which we use to this day, 37 years later, I'm happy to say. But it also was a function of looking within and, you know, kind of looking in the mirror and understanding what this is all about. And one of my first experiences there was when I got a behavioral assessment that helped me understand my own personal behavioral style. And at the time, I had a 1-year-old son, an infant son, and my wife, who I claimed to love more than anyone else in the world. But I didn't have a whole lot of self-awareness, and that was a revealing moment, and which required some pretty serious reflection. And then, upon sharing the results of that assessment, I asked if there was anything I could work on, and you won't be surprised to know that I got some feedback. And so part of that feedback related to my attention to detail, which is not a behavioral strength for me. I'm primarily results oriented. But it also was about patience, right? Because at the time, I was told I had all the patience in the world because I hadn't used any yet. I had a full inventory. And also listening skills, which are pretty important. And those two are highly, related. And so fast forward, it was interesting because the transformation took and the cultural evolution, in fact, was effective. I think it's a healthy testimony to our journey that several of the people who were invited to this process as leaders weren't willing to go along, and they subsequently were asked to go do something else with their careers, which I think is very, very healthy in terms of organizational health. And then it was probably in the 1990 timeframe, and I'll never forget this moment. We'd been on the journey, and we experienced the success that was attendant to it. And I was in my then boss's office, and he said, Guy, we've created the organization mission, vision, and values. Have you thought about your own? And of course, my answer was no. I haven't given any thought to it. But I'm pretty smart, and I got the implication. And I'll never forget walking across the hallway of our old administrative building, thinking to myself, as a guy with a journalism degree, this will take about 5 minutes. I'm a great writer, right? And then I discovered that the process involved a little bit more than writing. It involved a bunch of introspection. It involved an honest assessment of where I was, and to be honest with you, much of it, when it was written at that time, was written in the with a work perspective and a leadership perspective. But the folks that I coach today, fast forward, I also I always refer to this whole notion of leadership should be from the inside out. And so after much reflection and various attempts at capturing something way back then, what I came up with then was as a mission statement was to share what I have learned with others so they can achieve their highest and best use. And in all honesty, I didn't know what it meant. I didn't know what it implied. I didn't know what it would require. It just felt good with me in the construct of where we were at the time and evolving as individuals and teams and as an organization. And then, the values I chose were to be more loving and to be more honest and to demonstrate integrity. For starters, and I've done it my own consulting work with other companies. I don't I don't advocate a list of 10 or 15 or 20 values. You can't get there from here, right? We like to say a handful's a lot. So 3 to 5. And so why did I pick those three, right? Um, the honesty thing was not cash register honesty. It was the fact that at that point I was real tired of talking about people. I wanted to learn how to speak to people, which requires, an honest head, but also an honest heart, right? Working from a place of caring and concern and empathy and love and connection. Um, and then, the integrity piece, and I talk about this a lot because so many companies and culturally, I'm a real student of language and we throw words around, right? We throw words like integrity around. But if you look at the textbook definition, it's rigid adherence to a set of beliefs. And so the thing that I share with a lot of the people that I coach these days is I struggle. I still struggle all these years later, which is why I continue to lean into it. It's all about an evolution and a journey. And the word I use the most is alignment, right? We get out of alignment because we are human. We have moments when we fail. We have moments when we're vulnerable. We have moments literally of self-deception, right, around the voice in our own heads. Um, some of us are, with respect to the conflict, some of us are avoiders, and some of us are competitors, and some of us are cooperators. And some of us have more of a collaborative approach, but collaboration is assertive cooperation. It means if I care about you, I'm going to tell you the truth, right? I heard recently that nice people won't do that, but kind people will. And so that's a real long answer to a short question. That was kind of the evolution.
What was the behavioral assessment that you used?
We use the DISC model. There's a lot of different ones. I'm basically results oriented, primarily and secondarily interactive. And so, what we work with people all the time is this whole notion of adaptability, situational adaptability. Meeting people halfway. Um, I've been fortunate to have been immersed in this so long that it doesn't take me a whole long time to figure out people's behavioral style. And so you can either be like two ships passing in the night, or you can kind of modify and modulate so that you can connect with people.
You told us your mission and values. What is your vision?
Um, you know, the vision really so much for me is to embark and continue on a journey of continuous evolution. It doesn't have an endpoint, because that's what I've learned so much about life and about work is that I I don't have any problem with setting tangible goals that have a finite um, termination or measurement. But this whole, it's the same thing I ask these people that I work with every day in my work. There's two questions. One is uh, I think the smaller question, which would be, if I were coaching you to say, um, uh, what are you working on, right? What are you working on? Which might be, what are you what are you learning? What are you practicing? What are you trying to start to do or stop doing or do differently or do more of or do less of? There's a lot of stuff there that's more granular. But the question I like to ask people in my work is, who are you becoming? And that's a little bit different question. And there's a lot of people who have to think about that one.
So you underwent this organizational transformation. How exactly did you do it?
Uh, Very good question. It was a top-down effort. I'll get ahead of myself and then I'll come back. This started for us in the late 80s, and by about 1994, we had enough traction that we thought, let's create a consulting practice so we can go out and help the larger community with what we've learned. And I took uh, oversight for that in 1999. But our approach was the same one I advocate for, and I talked to someone who had called last week, and he said it has to start from the top. It has to start at the ownership level. It has to happen with an investment mindset. It has to be done with the understanding that this is not an end game. This is why we do what we do. The vision. This is how we do what we do, which is all about the values, right? And what we do essentially is our mission, but it's a never-ending journey. And so, concurrent with that, as we developed our own competencies to fit with this model, the number one competency in our organization is self-management. That's what we're asking people to focus on. And so it's, how do I work on Guy so I can be more effective with others, and how do you work on you? And then uh, the whole model basically is everyone making their beds and everyone's bed gets made, right? And so it's done with the notion that I am the only person that I can control in this world. I can influence others. I aspire to evolve and grow and learn and work with my adaptability and my learning agility. How do I use the various tools in different environments, way beyond work? Then the evolution can continue.
Any particular books or resources that helped you to come up with that model?
Uh, we didn't really use books at the time. We sure use a lot of books now. One of the outcomes of this whole um, effort, and it's been so fulfilling and so rewarding. It's the reason I'm still working. I didn't plan to be working at this point, but I was kind of responsive to where I am. So we we advocate for, we invest in lots and lots of coaching to complement the training and development work that we do. And probably not, I coach roughly 60 to 70 people within Holt. And then I do a lot of work in the nonprofit community as well. Not so many external clients at this point because I'm much more interested in helping my colleagues at a company that's um, had staggering growth. And I'll get to your question about books in a minute. Um, from that $30 million start, we're approaching $5 billion in revenue. And so,
Congrats.
yes,
Wait,
yes,
that's what the Caterpillar companies did? Or
yes, yeah, and affiliate companies that we have over 100 locations in Texas and Oklahoma. It's complicated and it's complex, but
that's the staggering growth you're referring to.
yeah, yeah. And so I never thought I'd see it. And what we attribute our success to is our culture. There's lots of other Caterpillar dealers. It's not what we do, it's how we do what we do. And, the nice thing is we have some pretty strong quantitative and qualitative evidence. And so the culture is always forefront. And so things like coaching and things like group group learning, right? So we'll get on Teams or we'll get on Zoom and we'll study books and discuss books. But some of the ones that I have found to be essential, fundamental, the Four Agreements, which is a very simple but challenging book. Um, Leadership from the Inside Out, which is a text I've used in a lot of my teaching at St. Mary's University and in the nonprofit world with my cohorts. The Untethered Soul by Michael Singer is another book that I like. The Outward Mindset. I would frame that um, as well. It's literally was talking to a group last week. It's human nature to say what's next and what's next and what's next and what book can I read and there's nothing wrong with that. There's nothing wrong with growing your awareness and your evolution. But what I also ask people all the time is, have you mastered the first book you read?
Have you put it into practice? Do you understand it? Do you still remember it? And are you practicing it?
Yes. And so I wouldn't recommend someone to go out and read 25 leadership books just to say they can check a box. Sometimes one or two can be very, very powerful. And you made a comment that really triggered um, another construct that we use. And so our learning model is learn, model, teach, measure. And that kind of discerns the difference between training and development. The training piece, which is about awareness and understanding, that's IQ work, right? That's basic intelligence. Can I take on the information and understand it? And so awareness and understanding are important, right? But then you got to get to the places where you embrace it and you apply it, right? And then you integrate it. And those are the development pieces, and that's all EQ. That's all emotional intelligence. That's either reading the book or becoming aware of an idea or going through a learning experience and saying, I need to work on it. Like the conversation with my wife all those years ago. Um, there's days now when I'll spend 6 hours coaching. It's not an unusual day for me because my role at Holt has morphed. And to coach, you kind of have to listen and be patient. And so it's how do we take people, going to class is great. Um, embracing it and integrating requires modeling and hopefully modeling to the point where you teach it. And then when we all become teachers, we get really, really powerful as an organization. If that makes sense.
Interested in the measure step because
Yeah.
that's my limiting factor. How do you measure it?
Well, I think that's another great question. It can be quantitative and qualitative, and you can use more of the conventional measures, like from an organizational perspective, retention, employee fulfillment, employee satisfaction, et cetera, et cetera. And we do those things. I think from an internal standpoint, it's interesting, and this is strictly from a coaching perspective. So I have some people I've literally been coaching for 10 years. And so I have um, the joy really of having seen the journey from a much broader perspective. And you literally have people come in on day one and say, "What's this all about?" And then you see the light bulbs go on. You see them embrace the feedback. You see them understand and learn the models. You see them, um, you know, being able to develop kind of the behavioral um, transmission to be able to do things that are important in the moment, right? So individually, it's just seeing how people evolve and how they change, uh, and one of the one of the things I point out to people all the time is leadership's not a self-report. I don't get to decide if I'm an effective leader. That's up to the people who are either inspired by me or enlightened by me or in some way benefit from what I have to offer. And so uh, so you can tune people into that, and that's why we've always said feedback's the breakfast of champions, right? It's how do you say let's set expectations up front, right, for both of us, um, to include what we hope to achieve, but let's all talk about the how. When I coach and in my work, one of the things I remind people all the time is in the business world and really in life, we're really good at the what. We are really good at saying this is what you need to do, and this is what your goals are, and this is what your budget is. Or we ask questions, what are you doing? What have you achieved? What are you up to? We want people to death. We really do. And to a lesser extent, we talk about the how. And of course, for us, how is behavior? Because everything in this world literally is achieved through behavior. So why wouldn't you want to teach people behavioral models and about their own behavior and the language of behavior? And then even typically less focused on in the corporate world is why. And it should always start with why. If we both have a good understanding and comprehension of the purpose, getting back to values writ large, of why we're doing what we're doing, we're going to be more invested in the how, and of course, then we'll be able to focus on the what.
What is your involvement in nonprofits?
That was been an interesting journey as well. About 9 years ago, the San Antonio Area Foundation, which is kind of the big funding granting source in the nonprofit community, um, approached me and asked. They had heard about Holt apparently, and asked if I could teach a cohort, for values-based leadership. And at the time, it was sponsored by one of the local energy companies. In fact, it was, I think, for the first 2 years that I was involved. And so we came in and basically taught shorter versions of our uh, core content, right, in the curriculum that we teach over about a 9-month period, which also included some other presenters with more business-oriented stuff, the hard side. And it was well received. And so after about 2 years, they asked Holt if we'd be interested in sponsoring it. And 9 years later, I just signed up for another 3 years. We take cohorts of about 20 or so nonprofit leaders because we want to have a smaller group. And we teach them stuff they're just not going to get, mostly because they're, as you well know, financially underserved and they don't have the advantages of a corporation like ours. And so it's received a lot of positive feedback. And of course, the joy for me is seeing that leadership grow within that community.
Who is your ideal client?
Um, you're asking some great questions. um, all right, our ideal client in the either public or private sector um, is rare. And I say that because most organizations might be interested in a learning process, right? Or come and teach us some stuff. Um, what, so the way we've modeled our practice from day one is we don't market, we don't promote, we don't advertise. Part of it way back when was that I had a day job, right? I was senior vice president of human resources and organizational development, and I've had various other functions throughout the years. Um, and so it's basically referral or people who've found out about us. But I was talking to another Caterpillar dealer, ironically, a couple of weeks ago, and they called and said, can you come up and help us develop competencies? And I said, sure, I can come up and do a 1 day meet with you guys and help you work through that, facilitate. Then they alluded to a longer process, right? That might involve something like putting a values-based model in place. And I said, now you're talking about a whole other animal, right? Because at, at, as a baseline, you're looking at a couple of years of work, number one. Then the next question is this something you want to learn, or is this something you want to integrate? And those are two completely different terms. And so I can point to clients, one in Richmond, Virginia, which was an aggregate company that called me in 2002. Caterpillar actually referred me. And I worked with them for several years. And they've gone on to create their own nonprofit that does the work that we do, right? And I'm on the board. That's a company that's invested. That's a company that's interested. That's a company that's benefited from the journey. But most companies, and it's not, again, it's not to pass judgment. They see training as an event-based um, process, where we see it. It's something you quote spend money on to get, to create awareness. And our process is no, this is an investment process that should go way beyond awareness. It should result in people's behavior changing.
It's like reading the
So my
book.
prem, yeah, well, yeah, I think that's a great analogy. And my MO with all the clients I've had over the years, because we literally work with Caterpillar dealers and uh, industrial clients. We work with another NBA franchise. We've worked with local banks. We work with the University of Texas. It's been a pretty broad spectrum, but um, my MO is, if you were a client, it would be to say, we're going to embark on this journey, but the way we do it, first of all, I'm going to give you a little time between pieces of content, at least 3 months, so you can think about them, reflect them, start applying it, right? Mastery takes a lot longer, but when I come back in 3 months, I'm going to ask you, how are you using X? Can you give me examples? And, if the evidence doesn't happen, I'll be your friend forever, but I'm not taking your money. I have other things to do. And so that's literally arguing against self-interest. But I'm not interested in training. I'm interested in development.
What's your biggest challenge to completing your vision?
I would say staying alive and staying healthy and staying alert. And I know that might sound facetious, but so much of it is just the capacity to be present, the capacity to keep it front of mind. One of the benefits that I did not, hindsight's always 2020, and so I had no idea what I was getting into. No idea all those years ago. I was able to figure out pretty quickly that I desperately needed it. That's for sure, in terms of my own evolution. And then my life's journey has put me in different roles as a spouse and as a father, and as a friend and as a colleague and as a contributor to the community. And, I say this tongue in cheek, but with serious grain of truth. One of the reasons I keep doing what I do is I still desperately need it. I don't want to be done. I mean, every day is a way to reframe it, to see it from a different perspective. When you turn the prism, to figure out things you're going to stop doing, and this may be surprising or not. We're all human. So we all have strengths and we all have limitations and we all have our inner narrator and we have all the things we have to cope with, both emotionally and psychologically. So, to be honest with you, after 44 years, work's pretty easy for me. It's not, I'm blessed to have the intellectual capital. I'm blessed to have wonderful opportunities. I'm blessed to have a lot of people who benefit from what I offer. There's a lot of work right here that comes up in the context of home life. One of the things I joke about is, in a marital relationship, you get a wedding, you get a marriage license. It's really a work permit, is what you get.
I
And
like that.
so, this is where the work is. It's not fixing other people. And so, if you're willing to keep having the conversation, if you're willing to actively listen, if you're willing to care, if you're willing to work from your head and your heart, then you can keep that alignment that I talk about all the time. I mean, I have part of it's my style, part of it's what I've learned. I have almost a compulsion to address conflict because, you know, God forbid if I get hit by a bus tomorrow, I want everyone in my life that I love to know that explicitly. And I can't point to a conflict that I have with anyone
Amazing.
because I address them. Yeah.
Wow, you're an extraordinary person, and I'm amazed at
Well,
I'm amazed at what you've built. So
yeah.
if I want to learn what you're doing for my nonprofit, how do I do that?
Um, well, um, there's some content, right, that I could share, as an overview, um, that kind of gives it a pretty good view of what the model entails and what the content entails. That'd be typically a good starting point.
Okay, I'll take you up on that.
Yeah. The other thing I did back in 2015 to 17 time period, I have about, and I don't go on there much at this point, but I have about 40 blogs on LinkedIn that talk about a lot of the content, a lot of my learning. For example, the whole notion of addressing and resolution, right, around the things I just talked about. Um, there were two blogs really. One was entitled Traveling Light. And that's the whole point, right? I want to be able to be here, be now, be present. I don't want to be distracted by 500 different things. This is my time with you, right? To be invested and to be present. Um, but another one that I had written, and I like catchy titles, was titled This Prison Has Become Your Home. Because, so much of my work now is grounded in emotional intelligence. And I can get frustrated and angry and say, well, you're on my list now, right? Because you said something to me in a meeting, or someone didn't finish their report on time, or someone drove over my lawn, whatever it might be, right? We're really good at creating the psychological prisons. The problem is, guess who gets to live in the prison with all the inmates? And I don't want to be a warden. And so, I think the capacity there, and it's been learned for me, and I'm still learning. It's called compassion. It's understanding that people struggle. People are trying to do their best, and a lot of people don't have self awareness, and they don't have abundance, and they don't have so many of the characteristics and resources that allow them to have their head and heart above water. And so, if I can help bring some of that out, I want to do it through kindness and caring and clarity, not through preaching and judging and telling people what they need to do. It's a failed effort.
Hearing you describe this is fascinating because it resonates with internal family systems, internal parts work, which perhaps is not conscious, but I think it just shows that um, truths converge from different angles. Well, I think the most impressive thing about your journey is it sounds like you came in as someone with very little emotional intelligence, and now you have a lot of it. And that personal
Yeah,
transformation
yeah,
is
yeah.
impressive. Is
It's
there
called the
anything
gift,
else
right?
for sure? Is there anything else you'd like to share with our Virtuous Leaders audience?
Well, just to invest in your greatest resource, right? This is your greatest resource.
Yourself.
And so, couple, two or three of the things that I remind people all the time. One is your inner narrator is not your friend. That's the voice that wakes you up at 2 a.m, lets you know that your podcast isn't going to go well the next day, right? Or whatever
Are you just spying on
deceptions.
me?
The other two. One is to practice self forgiveness, and that doesn't mean don't be accountable for the way you show up. That means forgive yourself, and I say to people all the time, you have two choices. One, you can keep living in the past. You can live with your regrets. That's fine, and you can revisit them. But it's such a great inhibitor to moving forward. Or you can learn from your mistakes. And growth requires mistakes. You don't want to have cataclysmic mistakes or, um, game enders. But as I ask people all the time, what have you made it through so far? And it's always the same answer, and that would be everything. And so the other, the other piece that's connected to self-forgiveness, self-kindness. We do so many things to undermine ourselves, from the messages in our own head, from the way we don't create kind of a healthy system that says, I'm going to be okay. And, I have a model on my whiteboard. I talk with a magic marker a lot because I'm a visual guy, but basically just shows a sine wave, right? The ups and downs of life and work. And you have good days and bad days. Um, and the real challenge for us in the leadership realm, but in life, the real challenge is to be okay. Because in the EQ construct, self-awareness is predicated on self-confidence. And self-confidence is not the ability to be predictive about the future. This discussion will go well. My presentation will go well. The party with my family will go well. That's not self-confidence. Self-confidence is whatever happens, I'm okay.
Exactly.
I can
Exactly.
navigate. And then it's my responsibility to help you navigate as well. And I think, I don't know if it was David Henry Thoreau or whoever, but it's that whole notion of the unexamined life is not worth living. There's so much work here. If you treat this person as worthy and someone that you love. I had recently heard in a
Yourself.
song of all things, because I love music, is the most important things in life to do are to love yourself and to love others.
Wow, that's incredible wisdom. Um, I can only think that wisdom like that only comes from God, as Plato said.
I've been a benefactor of all this investment in me. And so part of what I'm trying to do, getting back to my mission, just pay it forward to other people. I think you can identify with this, but when I look back at my career, um, no one remembers the budget from 1996. No one knows that you either came up short or exceeded your corporate goals in 2004. No one remembers that. They will remember how you touched them. They will remember the gifts you can give them of presence and availability and connection. And so my joy is in seeing other people grow. I have not found anything that's as emotionally or psychologically rewarding than seeing people grow.
Thank you, Guy Clumpner.
You're welcome.